Part 4 beginnings with Miles and the Gathering, who are frantic for help since Charlie hasn't recuperated from her injuries from prior. Miles chooses to look for help from a close buddy named Kipling, who is living in Philadelphia. In the interim, Tom Neville finds out about this and reports it to Monroe, who arranges the skipper to find and catch Miles. When inside Kipling's home, Miles leaves Nora, Aaron, and Charlie to go find Danny. Not long after he withdraws, Tom and the local army officers storm the house and catch Charlie and the others. Charlie is then calmed and tossed into a jail cell. Sooner or later, she stirs to track down her mom in the room with her. Since Charlie thought her mom was dead such an extremely long time, we can see her troubled, befuddled face. On the opposite side of the town, Tom has Aaron and Nora restricted. Strasser visits Rachel and Charlie in their jail cell. After genuinely insulting them for some time, he eliminates the two from the cell. In the meantime, Miles understands his companions' circumstance and chooses to pursue Tom. At the point when Tom shows up at his home, he sees Miles holding Julia at knifepoint. Miles requests that Tom free his companions. Strasser takes the Matheson young ladies to where Danny is being held. In spite of the fact that Danny is ridiculous and beaten, he is feeling quite a bit better to be brought together with his loved ones. Back at Tom's home, he consents to submit to Miles' requests since his better half's life is in question. Tom liberates Nora and Aaron. He then provides Miles with the area of Danny's jail cell. Miles' deal isn't finished, so he locks Mr. and Mrs. Neville in a wardrobe. At the jail cell, the cheerful gathering of the Matheson family is stopped by Monroe. Monroe needs Rachel to either make an enhancer machine or one of her youngsters winds up dead. Charlie will kick the bucket, assuming it implies keeping Monroe from having power and killing a great many individuals. Notwithstanding, Rachel, consistent with her protective obligations, won't allow her little girl to pass on, so she consents to help Monroe. Through a flashback, we discover that Monroe's whole family was killed when they were hit by an alcoholic driver while heading to see a film. At the point when he mulled over self-destruction, Miles had talked him down. Furthermore, let him know that both of them were family. As of now, Rachel begins her work with the speaker, while Charlie and Danny are reburied in a jail cell. Fortunately, the kin break out and take out their watchman and break out and look for their mom. Because of Tom's understanding, Miles and the group show up where the two kin are kept. Nora believes that Aaron should remain outside with a sack of bombs to work with their escape while she and Miles head inside. In the meantime, Rachel finishes the speaker and re-establishes capacity to Monroe. On the opposite side of the structure, Charlie also Danny are cornered by Monroe's warriors, yet fortunately, Miles and Nora save them in the nick of time. In Rachel's studio, Strasser makes undesirable advances to her. Bothered, Rachel assaults Strasser with a mallet. He at first overwhelms her, however she makes do to snatch a blade and wound him. All of a sudden, Miles strolls in on her, gazing over the dead man's body. Before long, Monroe shows up at the scene with his fighters and starts terminating at Miles. Also, Rachel. Miles advises Rachel to go get her children. All in the wake of killing Monroe's watchman. Miles and Monroe arrive at an impasse. Both have weapons on one another, yet neither can pull the trigger. The series streaks back to when Miles and Monroe were youngsters. They were drawing a plan on their wrists, which is the ongoing civilian army image M, representing Monroe and Matheson. Back as of now, Monroe argues for a significant distance to return to the Republic. In any case, Miles is disturbed with what his previous dearest companion has become. At the point when Miles disavows Monroe, Monroe is angered and begins going after Miles. Meanwhile, Nora prevails with regards to getting Charlie. What's more, Danny out of the structure. Rachel additionally finds them. Before sufficiently long, Aaron explodes the bombs, subsequently permitting the gathering to get away. Monroe puts a kill request on Miles, who leaps through a window. He finds the others and they get away from the compound. As the gathering heads across a vacant eatery, they hear choppers turning upward. They spot a tactical helicopter, weapon prepared on them. It just so happens, Monroe has placed the power enhancer in real life. Not long later, the helicopter begins terminating the gathering and even send-offs a rocket that explodes the spot. Fortunately, the gathering gets by protecting through a stroll-in refrigerator. Nora calls attention to that she realizes a close-by rebel camp in Westchester, so the gathering takes off. In the following scene, Charlie and Nora mask themselves in local army regalia and drive a cart stacked with final resting places to cross Philadelphia borders. Albeit the gatekeeper at the boundary entryway demands seeing what's inside the cart, he sees as nothing dubious. The gathering then effectively makes it out. Similarly, as they show up external the city, they see helicopters arise into the great beyond. It just so happens, the choppers are made a beeline for the Rebel bunch in Westchester. Before long, we see the state army helicopters snare the camp, killing everybody inside. Realizing this, Rachel recommends they battle power with power. She then specifies a companion who lives close by he might have the option to assist with some rocket launchers. With the Westchester camp trapped, Nora proposes. They go to Renegade Central Command in Annapolis while Miles and Rachel set off on a mission to track down the companion. Next, Charlie, Aaron, and Nora arrive at the rebel headquarters, where the commanders are already aware of Monroe's airstrikes. Nora tells them about Miles and Rachel's trip to get rocket launchers. They are going to war against the Monroe Republic. Meanwhile, Nate spies Charlie and her group through binoculars. He and other militia soldiers, under the command of his dad, Tom, are scoping out rebel camps. When Tom learns that Charlie and the group are nearby, he orders his son to call in airstrikes. But Nate has had enough. The militia is killing too many families and children. Fearing Nate is misjudging because of his affection for Charlie, Tom beats him to the ground. He then disowns his son, commanding him to never come home again. Elsewhere, Rachel and Miles meet up with her friend John Sanborn. Rachel tells about the Monroe situation to Sanborn and pleads for help with ammunition. In the woods, Nate finds Charlie and finally reveals his true name, that is Jason Neville. Charlie is quick enough to realize that he is actually Major Tom Neville's son. Nate warns her of his father's impending airstrike. Back at Sanborn's house, he informs Rachel that Flynn got to Grace and has her captive. He adds that Flynn's gotten to him too and apologizes before knocking out Rachel and Miles with a sonic cannon. At the camp, Charlie warns the rebel commanders of the pending airstrike, and they get ready to fight back. Meanwhile, Rachel and Miles regain consciousness to find they're tied up. Sanborn informs that Flynn is on his way to get Rachel. After struggling for a while, Miles breaks out of his restraints and knocks John out. He and Rachel quickly grab rocket launchers and head toward the rebel camp. Next, Tom returns to Philadelphia and reports to Monroe that he's located Charlie and the group at the rebel camp. Tom seems rattled. So when Monroe asks what's the matter, he tells him that Nate is dead. Monroe has his helicopters sent across the camp. Soon enough, a firefight breaks, killing a couple of rebel soldiers. Thankfully, Miles and Rachel pull up in a wagon with the rocket launchers. Miles attempts to aim the rocket launcher at the helicopter carrying the amplifier but is disturbed and wounded by another chopper's rockets. With his uncle knocked out, Danny runs into the open and grabs the rocket launcher. He successfully brings down the chopper with the amplifier, and with no power, the attack is over. Unfortunately, due to the power loss, the automated guns in the choppers malfunction, and Danny is shot multiple times. He falls to the ground, dead. In the aftermath of Danny's death, Charlie and Rachel are devastated. They decide they must kill Monroe for Danny. In Philadelphia, Flynn visits Monroe and introduces himself along with Sanborn. He claims that he wants to help Monroe in taking over the United States. Back at the rebel camp, Rachel sobbingly cuts open Danny's abdomen to extract a mysterious blinking capsule. Later that night, rebel leader General Wayne Ramsey suggests they regroup at an Echo base. Miles promises to help the rebels fight. He knows how to beat Monroe, but he will need his own men, that is, former senior militia officers. Nora and Miles set out to find Jim Hudson in hopes of getting him in to kill Monroe. With Miles and Nora gone, the remaining rebels start retreating to Echo base. Meanwhile, Aaron removes 2 pendants from his backpack. When he leaves the room, the pendants mysteriously turn on. It turns out that they have been activated remotely by Flynn. He tells Monroe that he has been randomly activating the pendants to track them. Miles and Nora head towards Jim Hudson's location, which is a town called Culpeper. As Miles and Nora set off for Culpeper, a traitorous rebel named Brian overhears their plans and sells the info out to a militia captain, Joseph Deckard, who was camping in the North Virginia woods. At Echo base, Rachel examines the capsule she extracted from Danny's corpse under a microscope and records its serial number. Next, Miles and Nora arrive in Culpeper. They find Hudson inside a library. When Miles approaches him, Hudson insists Miles has mistaken him for someone else. After taking the pair into a back room, Hudson aims his gun at Miles and tells him to leave immediately. He still hates Miles for not killing Monroe when he had the chance. This is when they were still in the Monroe militia. Miles says that he has come to seek Hudson's help in finishing the job. Back at Echo base, Rachel notices the flashing pendants and becomes alarmed. Suddenly, a siren sounds and the rebel members notice a convoy of militia Humvees marching towards Echo base. At Culpeper, Hudson tells Miles that as much as he hates Monroe, he has a wife and a quiet existence now, and he does not want to lose that. In the meantime, the rebels hurry everyone out of Echo Base's compound before Monroe's men arrive. As Charlie readies to leave, she realizes her mom is nowhere to be found. Rachel is in the lab, destroying the pendants with sulfuric acid. Aaron freaks out, but Rachel remarks that Flynn was using the pendants to track them. As the pendants dissolve, a stunned Aaron realizes that there were flash drives inside them. Suddenly, the Humvees ram through the gate, and militia troops spread out. Flynn rummages through the building and finds the dissolved flash drives. Outside Hudson's place, Nora is upset Hudson didn't agree to join them. As they are talking, Captain Joseph Deckard and his militia kill squad march down the road toward Culpeper. Meanwhile, Flynn flashes back 16 years when he was informed about the devastating news. His son Edward Flynn was killed in action in Kabul, Afghanistan. In the present, as Monroe's men search the compound, Charlie realizes the only way out is to fight back. While hiding, Rachel confesses she was working on a weapon for Flynn when he was the Assistant Secretary of the Department of Defense. That is when the power went out. Suddenly, Flynn calls out to Rachel over a megaphone. He shouts that he didn't come for the pendants, but Rachel and he is not leaving without her. After seeing the militia soldiers, Miles rushes back and informs Hudson about the situation. Hudson is furious, convinced that Monroe's men followed Miles to Culpeper. Back at Echo Base, two guards storm into the room where Charlie, Aaron, and Rachel are hiding. When Charlie takes one out with her crossbow, the group makes a run for it. Meanwhile, in Culpeper, Monroe's kill squad surrounds the town. Hudson, Miles, and Nora show. When Captain Deckard spies Hudson's wife watching from a nearby house, he goes after her. Back at Echo Base, Charlie reunites with Aaron, and the two set out to find Rachel. Unfortunately, Flynn captures Rachel and plans to take her back to Monroe in Philadelphia. Flynn is interested in building a better, safer world with Rachel's help. When the militia prepares to leave, Charlie stops them with a storm of gunfire. Rachel quickly breaks free, long enough to escape with Aaron and Charlie. Meanwhile, Deckard breaks into Hudson's house and corners his wife. Thankfully, Hudson arrives just in time to kill Deckard from behind and save his wife. After the incident, Hudson decides to join Miles' cause to kill Monroe. A while later, Miles and Nora meet up with the rest of the group at their rendezvous point in the woods. In the final scene of the episode, the series flashes back to the night of the blackout. Flynn and his colleagues are seated at a round table at the tower, discussing a mission. He talks with Ben over a video, where Ben asks if Flynn is certain about his decision. Flynn grips his dead son's dog tags and disturbingly says that it is time to execute the virus.